Yeah, so before we get onto the stock, you may have noticed that the cocking arm and the trigger assembly were missing from the bluing process items. And the reason for that was there simply was no need to do it. The cocking arm is in pretty much perfect condition. There is no rust on it, and the bluing is fine, so there was no point in touching that. Same with the trigger. The trigger was in really good condition. There was a little bit of rust on the interior part of the trigger, which is the actual sear part, but I basically got at that as best I could with some wire wool and then soaked it in oil, and it seems to be fine now, so there was no need to do that. So what we're going to do now is move on to the stock. Now, as I said previously, I'm not going to do too much work on the stock because it's actually in pretty reasonable condition. Yeah, there are a few nicks and scrapes on it down that end up here, but overall I think it's quite nice. So what I'm going to do, as I said, I'm going to use some very fine steel wool, and I'm going to go all over it with the wool, see if we can get some of the marks out, because there are a few dirt marks in it, which I'm hoping here I might be able to get out with the steel wool. So we're going to do that, and then I'm just going to wipe it down with some tung oil and let that soak in, and that'll pretty much be it for the stock. Yeah, so it's very simple procedure. It's, you know, not really rocket science. Very simple, straightforward. You just take your wire wool and give it. I mean, obviously, like when you're doing any work on any wood with an abrasive, it should always be done with the grain, not against the grain. And I'm not a carpenter or a woodworker, but even I know that. So. And this will give this will rough up the surface and allow the tung oil to penetrate. So. Right, well, I'll keep going with that. You don't need to see me do all of this, and I'll come back when it's time to apply the oil. So I've got some tung oil in here, and I've got a little bit of microfiber cloth, just a little bit, and we're going to use that as the applicator, and we're just going to wipe it on. They do say that you can dilute the tung oil for the first application because it makes the wood absorb it easier. You can dilute it with white spirit, but I've never found that necessary. I just use it neat and it works fine. So I'm going to carry on do this and finish it off, and then we're going to string it up on the retort stand for it to dry, as you have to leave it for about 20 minutes for it to soak in, and then we'll come back and see what it's like. Well, the stock is finished and it's come out okay. Clean up a lot of the little marks, so that's great. Right, the moment of reassembly. So first is the piston assembly, which I've re-greased, and that goes in first, obviously, hopefully. There we go. Very important to make sure that the notch that the searing gauge with is this bit here is uppermost, which of course will be down because this is the underside of the receiver. Right, that's fully downed. Now we put the spring back in, which is lovely and greasy. And finally, the spring follower, which obviously has to go with the threaded hole upright. So. And obviously this time I am going to have to compress this to get it lined up with where the bolt goes in. So hopefully that won't be too much of a problem. I'm going to do that off camera. Well, that was actually quite easy. There's not an awful lot of preload on the spring, so I was able to push it in with just using a bit of wood, and then you put that in initially, and then obviously we got to put the trigger assembly in, and then we can put the pin back in. So let's get our trigger assembly. Which should go in there, hopefully. There we go. And then the pin, which I've got to tap in, obviously. Get the holes lined up. That's not quite, let's come down a little bit. There we go. Where's the, oh there it is, right. Right, I'm going to do that off camera because that's going to need a little bit of fiddling. Well, that wasn't too difficult actually, surprisingly. I think the next thing is going to be a bit fiddly. I've got to get the trigger spring back in. And it has to be compressed into quite a small space. Over the front guide and then over onto the back guide. So I don't know whether I'm going to be able to do this with my fingers or not. No. Fly it across the workshop. Right, let's try again. Right, hopefully I'll get this these operations the right way around. Now I think we need to put that on next, and then we can fit the end cap and let's come through there. That's oh, I see, it's got to go that way. Yeah, then you can turn it that way. Alright. And then we've got to get the hole lined up for the pin, which it is, which is this one. I think that's a bit better. Yeah, there we go. So that should push that way when it's, yeah. Okay, we're getting there. Great. So I think now what we need to do is put that in there. The little spring washer. Then I think we can put this back in place. Just need to tighten that up and we should be done. Yeah, we're all good. Close in on that a little bit. There you go. Of course the rear sight is actually mounted on the barrel and not on the receiver. So let's put that back together. If we can find the little spring. Oh, there we go. Which is a little bit bent, but still does the job. There we go. And then that goes in there, lined up with the hole. So tap that down a little bit. Which goes in, hopefully. There we go. Quite back up. Job done, hopefully. There we go. Yeah, there, yes, there we go. Yeah. Right, so that's that done. So I think the next thing is to put the cocking arm back onto the bottom of the barrel. Now, I have put a little bit of grease where this pivot arm goes, but basically it's just a matter, I think, of getting that in there and tapping our pin back in. It might even get away with a little tappy hammer. There we go. Job done. I think we can now reassemble the barrel and the receiver. So here we go. I have greased the inside faces of there, and I've also put a little bit of grease on the retaining screws. So basically what we have to do is put this, actually I'll put some grease on there too. That would be a good idea. I don't quite need that much, I don't think. Because that's going to be doing some sliding. So first up we've got to locate that in there. So basically that goes in there like that, and then that goes in there like that, and hopefully that will go through there. Oh, everything goes together so nice when you've got plenty of grease on it. Right, so I'm just going to tighten that up with a screwdriver and put the locking screw in, and then that will be the whole of the action, as it were, back together. Now unfortunately I can't try this until I put it back into the stock, because this cocking arm bears up against the little cap in the stock, and that stops this arm from coming out that way. So if you try and cock it like this, all that happens is this arm pops out this way. So we've got to get it back into the wooden stock. So first up, the little spring goes in. There we go. Then the cap. There we go. Now I'm going to put a little dob of grease on there. Can't do anything but help. And then I'll pull back out so you can see the actual fitting of the whole barrel receiver unit. Right, there we go. Now I need to get some securing screws in. And I think what we will do is we will put the main one in first, that's part of the trigger guard. Yeah, this one is quite tricky because it's a big screw, but the trigger adjusting screw gets in the way, and I guess obviously I could have put that in afterwards, but you know me, I'm not unlazy, shall we say. Okay, right, so I'm going to move on to the front screws now, and of course we've got to find another star washer because there was only one, so that's way too small a screwdriver for that. Let's try that. This one's too small as well, actually. You need a bigger one for these, really. Okay, right, well, I'll put the other trigger guard screw in and the other front fixing screw, and then we'll be ready to give it a test run. The Haenel 303 is finished, and I'm very pleased with the way it turned out. I have testified it and it all works absolutely fine. we will do some shooting with it later, and I will also put it over the chronograph because obviously having oiled up the seal, we may well see a slight increase in performance from it. But no, it's all turned out quite nicely.